One fateful night, Christmas Eve 2014 to be exact. A little Snorly was to get his hands on a PlayStation 4. He had wished for a Naughty Dog's The Last of Us bundle, but ho ho! Because little Snorly had been such a good boy this year, Santa put a very special gift in for him.
Driveclub.
The game I never searched for, but luckily found its way to me. The vanishing of Driveclub is nothing less than a tragedy. It was one of those rare racing games that offered more than just the satisfaction of an exhilarating sense of speed. It was a supernatural, yet believable portrayal of a racing fantasy with an almost perfect fusion of arcade fun and sophisticated simulation, providing an immersive experience for any type of player. It absorbs you with its wonderful landscapes, menacing weather conditions, a memorable ambient soundtrack, and graphics so stunning it already pushed the limits of the PS4 very early in its lifespan. Driveclub had a rough start, with a metascore that didn't translate into what some would consider a classic today. But with enough support and new content from the developers, Driveclub still managed to capture the fascination of more than just a few players, building up a small but passionate fan base over the years that followed. And yet, this game marked the end for the traditional second-party PlayStation developer, Evolution Studios. Known for creating the WRC and MotorStorm series, they had already earned a place in the hearts of millions of racing fans. But that didn't stop Sony from closing the studio. I'm Grumpy Snorly, and this is my personal retrospective on Driveclub. My personal odyssey with the racing genre began as a little nipper on the SNES with Super Mario Kart. At the end of the 90s, I played a lot of Need for Speed 2 and 3 Hot Pursuit. And shortly after, I wasted way too much time with Autobahnraser. What the heck? What is this game? Does anyone outside of Germany even know this? Someone? Anyone?
Das ist die erste Überwachung.
During my teenage years, my love for the genre was finally cemented, because at the time, there was no way around NFS Underground 1 and 2. These groundbreaking games established a formula that was then brought to perfection with their sequel Most Wanted. By the way, this video here is just a side project that resulted from my text about Most Wanted getting way too long. If you don't want to miss this awesome video, like, subscribe and hit the bell.
First, I'm gonna
Like the video,
then I'm gonna
subscribe to the channel.
get ready for that.
Most Wanted was not only a phenomenal racing game, no, it also shaped the zeitgeist of an entire generation. For me, Most Wanted defined what racing games should be. That's why I found it so difficult to accept the shift towards simulation at the time. Disappointed by the following Need for Speed entries, and with no interest in any of that sim stuff, I ignored the genre for a long time. I didn't want to get into simulation because I couldn't understand why a lap on the Nürburgring should feel as sweaty as an Elden Ring boss fight. Oh, if only had I known that exactly this is the whole appeal to it. Driveclub unfortunately has a sad and complicated history. During its troubled development, it was delayed several times. There were many reasons for these postponements. First, Sony cut the budget, which meant that many of the studio's staff had to be fired in 2013. Then game director Paul Roshinsky left the project towards the end for family reasons. His successor brought the entire team back to the drawing board, just a few months before the originally planned release. This happened because Driveclub, as the name of the game implies, put a big emphasis on a social system-driven multiplayer mode.
You know, what did community mean to us? You had to have the ability for players to race both competitively but also collaboratively. And if they're going to collaborate, they've got to be together in a club.
To ensure that players had a smooth online experience, they focused on making the menus as intuitive as possible. They called it
The dynamic menu.
With an additional app for smartphones and tablets, they wanted to give the players a constant insight into online activities and challenges. It may sound ridiculous today that integrating such things properly into a game caused Evolution Studios so much trouble, as features like this are now standard in many multiplayer titles. But back then, they were venturing into completely new territory with this, and being forced that late in development to get this to work did the game more harm than good. In my opinion, this multiplayer component has led to even more confusion with the already poor marketing. Many interested gamers simply didn't know what they were being served here. They wondered whether Driveclub is more of a single or multiplayer experience. And when the game finally released in October 2014, multiplayer was not even working. I think that was what caused all the negative reviews. The E3 2014 trailer was so focused on familiarizing people with the social aspects that it completely failed to show what kind of racer Driveclub actually is. It didn't want to be a simulation, but the most authentic blend of realism and arcade that one could imagine at the time. The first Horizon installment had only been released 2 years prior, at the end of 2012, so people couldn't understand at the time that Driveclub was supposed to be Sony's attack on Microsoft's major hit. But the trailers made it seem more like a serious motorsport game than a light-hearted festival, so you can't blame people for that misjudgment. And they were right when they said that Sony doesn't need a second Gran Turismo. I think these are the reasons why it performed so bad at first, with just 2 million units sold in its first year. But fortunately, that didn't stop Evolution from continuing their work on the game. They have put all their passion and many efforts into providing it with additional content to keep Driveclub alive, so that their years of dedication have not been in vain. First, a season pass with a large number of new campaigns were released in 2015, and later that year, a big expansion with Driveclub bikes. The VR version then completed the roadmap in 2016.
Driveclub.
From the first second, I was in love. It felt so good and was so much fun, but at the same time different. Unlike anything I had ever known. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't know how a sim played back then. That's why Driveclub was able to capture me with its portrayal of realism, changing my perception of racing games entirely, bent the rules of physics just slightly enough so that the fun factor wasn't lost, found just the right balance between realism and enjoyment to make it as accessible as possible for noobs like me. It made me consider things I had never thought about before, like how heavy a car weighs on the road, or how sensitive it has to handle. It taught me the basics of modern racers, like at what angle the ideal line lies, how to approach a 90-degree turn, or the principle of having more control over steering when you are not on the brakes. And when you've mastered all the techniques enough to take on the challenges Driveclub throws at you, you will feel like a total badass as you conquer them. The way the camera shakes as you hurtle over the uneven tarmac. The pressure you feel when you have to outbalance the weight of your car at top speed to keep it straight on the track. The satisfaction you get from taking a sharp corner so well that you leave your opponents behind when you get back into gear. All these things make you feel the ecstasy of racing in the most adrenaline-charged way. I mean, why do we play racing games? We want to experience what it's like to drive a real race. We want to feel the rush of speed that comes with it. And we want to get as close as possible to the danger that surrounds it. But we also want to be entertained and not invest too much effort in learning the necessary skills. So if a game succeeds in overcoming my suspension of disbelief to such an extent as to make me believe I'm the greatest racer on God's green concrete-covered earth,
And I'm better than you, and you know it!
and I can't hold myself back from pure euphoria, shouting "woo" for minutes after a play session,
Woo! 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 Woo!
then this game is definitely convincing enough that I personally no longer need a simulation. Driveclub is still the most immersive arcade racer out there. Maybe not in every aspect, maybe Horizon 5 has more accurate physics, or even more faithful imitated vehicles. But there's no other game that sucks you into its environment, its world, its momentum, as much as this one. Driveclub doesn't just intoxicate you, it awakens your emotions. And I want to tell you how it does. So tell me, what's the most important thing that a racing game needs to be captivating? Yes, that's right. Absolutely stunning graphics. I couldn't believe my eyes when I first saw this in 2014, and it still looks quite impressive. Especially when you consider that this footage is only 1080p at 30 FPS. Just incredible. As you can imagine, this never changed on a PS5 because, unfortunately, that game's never got patched. The way the sunlight reflects in the paintwork. The little hopping into the car cutscene, showing you the interior of the car before each race. There are just so many small but lovingly crafted things that elevate the pleasure of driving. Driveclub goes beyond the ideal image of reality when it displays the beauty of its racetracks. The heroic heights of the snow-covered Norwegian mountains, or the swirling sand in the steppes of Chile. You will get to know these astonishing locations. Learn to appreciate their welcoming charisma as you travel all over the globe. The amount of fascinating details scattered around the tracks is baffling. Each and every one of them is overgrown with suitable vegetation, and the roads are covered in dirt or mud. They all flawlessly capture the impression that technology must yield when nature takes its toll. And then there's the fact that this game has the only virtual sun that can make you go blind if you look into it for too long. Never before have I seen such a difference in brightness, depending on whether the sun is behind the camera or shining right in your face. The lighting in this game is simply top-notch. Even with the latest ray tracing technology, it would be hard to replicate what Driveclub achieved back then. The authentic changes between light and dark make racing through a tunnel an unprecedented thrill. And I'm telling you, there's no greater experience than starting a race in the warm, cozy light of the setting sun. And as soon as night falls for the last lap, you have to find your way around the track with nothing but your car's headlights. When the fear of not knowing what lies beyond your sight overcomes you like in a horror game, you start worrying that at this speed, the next turn could be your end. This is the moment when darkness becomes your greatest enemy. But this is not the only danger with which the forces of nature will try to bring you to your knees. As the first raindrops fall onto the camera, the mood begins to change. Lightning illuminates the grey sky, and you can hardly keep control of your vehicle due to aquaplaning. In scenarios like these, the game not only lets you compete against other riders, it literally lets you fight against the weather. And it makes you sense this threat by portraying the clash of natural forces against scientifically perfected automotive engineering in the most intense way. This thematical juxtaposition is so impressively orchestrated, it blew me away 10 years ago, and it still does today. I know that weather conditions have long been state of the art in more realistic racing games. I recently spent a little time with the game that has the funniest name ever. Assetto Corsa Competizione. Sorry for saying it like that. I know I'm making a fool of myself. ACC is the most immersive racing game one could ask for. And you get that realistic experience even if you are a noob like me, who uses all the assists it provides. Your car feels like a bull. You can't tame it, you have to learn how to survive in it until it throws you overboard. This game is absolutely unforgiving, and any big mistake will send you into a tailspin.
Bring the car back in one piece.
The rain of course changes the behavior of your car completely, and learning how to recalculate the braking distance on a wet surface is a welcome challenge. But it is just a condition depicting reality, and sadly there's nothing more to it. Don't get me wrong, this is absolutely fitting for a simulation. And there's nothing wrong with it. But I wanted to show you the rain in ACC so that you can understand the difference. As a sim arcade hybrid, Driveclub can sacrifice a bit of realism in favor of artistic vision. Its weather is not realistic. It's a wonderfully overdrawn illustration of meteorological phenomena. That's why it feels so daunting, almost monstrous. Like an ubiquitous entity, it lurks over the tracks, making you feel its constant antagonistic presence. The weather may be greatly exaggerated, but it has character, and that's why it creates such an intense vibe. But all these visual and atmospheric aspects would not come fully into fruition if they were not accompanied by a great soundtrack. Easily my favorite racing OST of all time. Unlike many other racing games, Driveclub decided not to license music, but instead had original music composed for it. The British band Hybrid was hired for the job, who not only already had a successful career as EDM artists, during which they also explored trip-hop and many other subgenres, but also had many movie OSTs in their resume. For the game, they arranged 5 tracks that perfectly combined electronic beats, shuffling basses, slow but deeply reverberating synthesizer melodies, and epic orchestral interludes to an audiovisual texture that adds a deeper layer to the expression of this game. all 5 are absolutely fantastic, giving the game such a dreamy mood as soon as you load up the main menu. You might ask,
Hey Snorri, aren't 5 songs a bit repetitive for a whole game you want to spend days or even weeks with?
yes? That's why a bunch of other EDM producers made remixes of these tracks, which take up their leitmotifs, use a bunch of samples from the originals, and combines them with their own unique ideas to new, almost virtuoso songs. They perfectly underpin the experience and get you hooked on every race. Although these rearrangements often belong to completely different subgenres as their OG counterparts, have a different timing or BPM to create a distinct flow, or even exude totally new vibes, they all have this clear recognition value that makes them so memorable. This way, the leitmotifs remain fresh and do not become stale despite constant repetition. They will become so ingrained in your blood through their presence and catchiness that you will instantly recognize them as Driveclub. This is what makes the soundtrack so rich in variety without running the risk of a single track breaking out of the ambience Driveclub wants to convey. Even though I already felt it as a teenager while playing Most Wanted, which had such a charming distinct vibe and a killer soundtrack. It was only through Driveclub that I understood one very important thing. The driving, the raw core of the gameplay, is usually not enough to create a unique and memorable experience. I mean, what do we do in racing games? We want to be the first to cross the finish line. This premise is more or less always the same, even with the games made by Nintendo. That's why it's necessary to find a concept that will make the players feel an emotion they can't get anywhere else, to imply them that this one is different from the rest. Driveclub nailed this task with its atmospheric racetracks and the convincing thematical examination of nature versus machine, underscored with music that blends all of this together perfectly. A good racing game is about more than just driving. Like any other piece of art, it has to make you feel something, and Driveclub just hits different. Unfortunately, Evolution Studios was closed by Sony at the end of 2016, most likely due to budget cuts. A large part of the staff was then taken over by Codemasters, as both studios are located in England. At their side, they helped to develop Unrush, which was released in 2018. With the spiritual successor of MotorStorm, they succeeded in continuing the legacy of Evolution Studios. I played the game for a while and had a lot of fun with it. That's why it is such a shame that the game was also a financial flop. Consequently, Sony lost interest in Codemasters and sold it to EA in 2020 for $1.2 billion. They then transferred the remaining ex-Evolution employees to another British studio, Criterion. It is therefore possible that some of the people who worked on Driveclub are also listed in the credits of Need for Speed Unbound. As of April 2020, Sony removed the game from its store. Expired licenses with the car manufacturers are most likely the reason for this, and Sony didn't want to fork out the money to renew them for a game that they consider a failure. Although there are still enough versions of the base game on Blu-ray in stock, anyone who buys the game today will be denied access to digital add-ons for all eternity. At the same time, all multiplayer servers were shut down. An absolute shame, marking the final step right into the heart of the game. Ironically, you can still download the companion app on Google Play today, commented on by numerous fans mourning the death of their beloved game. Driveclub does the same, by popping up this notification at the start of every race, constantly reminding you of the sad fate it has endured. Another work of art that has fallen victim to bad company policy. And quite wrongly so, because over the years, a loyal fanbase had formed. The Insomniac leak earlier this year revealed that Driveclub has sold 4.97 million units, which may be not enough for a AAA second-party title, but enough to say that the closure of Evolution Studios was unnecessary. I spent so much time in this video talking about the features that make Driveclub unique, because these are the things people will remember it for. I could have talked a little more about the gameplay itself, pointing out where it has its flaws, as for example the often bad opponent AI, or the strange penalty system, are just two of a few examples that prevent it from reaching true greatness. But these are just minor issues compared to all the ingenuity that makes it irreplaceable for me. Nevertheless, Driveclub will always have a place in my heart. It reignited my love for racing games, and remains as my favorite in the genre to this day. A simcade racer that impresses on its surface with beautiful graphics and ambitious detail fidelity, and entertains at its core with supernatural elements and thrilling speed. It was my first exposure to this type of racing, and I wanted more. It was exhilarating and just so satisfying. And since I could be 100% sure that there will never be another game like Driveclub, I had to find a worthy replacement. And for a long time, it seemed that there was only one video game series that had the potential to accomplish this: Forza Horizon. A franchise that I came to love just as much as I despise it. But that's a story for another video. Thanks for watching, and check out one of my other videos. See you next time, yours truly, Grumpy Snorley.